Assalamu alaikum girls. Hope so you are doing good. In the previous lecture, I very briefly told you about the stages of psychosocial development given by Erik Erikson. And we just discussed the names of these stages, as you can see in this flowchart as well. The names of the stages: trust versus mistrust, and the age at which it happens is the infancy. Autonomy versus shame and doubt, it is the toddlerhood. Initiative versus guilt, preschool years. Industry versus inferiority, grade school years. Identity versus role confusion, teenage. Intimacy versus isolation, young adult. Generativity versus stagnation, middle-aged adult. Integrity versus despair, older adult. I told you in the previous lecture that all these stages, they are marked with a crisis. Means that individual faces crisis during each stage of life. As you can see, trust versus mistrust. Either the child will feel trusted or will have the feelings of mistrust. So this is a crisis. Now, how the child overcomes this crisis, it matters a lot. If the child overcomes this crisis with success, then psychosocial development will progress. There will be strength in psychological development. And if it is not proceeded with the healthy overcoming of the crisis, then there will be delay in the psychological development. Fine. So let us start with the stage 1, which is known as basic trust versus mistrust. Now this stage lasts from birth to 1.5 years, and child is entirely dependent upon parents. As you can see, from birth till 1.5 years, child is completely dependent upon the parents or the caregivers for all of their need fulfillment, for feeding, for cleanliness, for warmth, love and care. They are completely dependent upon their parents or caregivers. Now, if the parents or the caregivers, they are able to provide sufficient love, care, protection to the child, then this need or this crisis is fulfilled with success, and the child has trust in himself and others. And if it is not fulfilled in the proper way, then the child develops mistrust, not only for his own self, but for people around him. He develops these feelings that whenever he is in need of something, there is no one to help him, no one to take him out from that particular crisis or situation. So this is very important, that there should be feelings of trust after the completion of the stage developed in the child. Now the second stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Now the autonomy means to develop the feelings of independence, to do the things on your own. Fine. Now this stage lasts till 3 years of age. Now the very important aspect related to this stage is toilet training. And if you remember Freud's theory, then toilet training was also very important in Freud's psychosexual stages of development. Now here the child is taught to have self-control, to have control over physiology, over his physiology related to toilet training, over the urination and defecation. The child should exercise control. That what is the place, what is the time of properly excreting these things. Fine. Now, if the child receives proper training, it develops autonomy, and energy is consumed into learning constructive skills. Child develops this feeling that he can do constructive things in life. He has the potential, he has that freedom, he has that energy to do constructive, positive activities in his life. And if no attention is given, or very strict environment, or very strict training is given, then the child develops doubt. Child is not autonomous. Child feels shame, feels doubt whether to do this thing or not to do this thing. Whereas an autonomous child feels secured and has the energy to perform any task. The third stage is initiative versus guilt. Now, initiative means to do something on your own, to start a project, to start a thing. Now, this stage lasts from 3 to 6 years of life. And the child basically wants to have freedom. What type of freedom? Now, he wants to do the things on his or her own, on his own will. Whatever he wants to do, he wants to accomplish that. Encouragement is very important here. Now, if a child does a very little thing, he or she should be encouraged, because that encouragement will enable the child to acquire the ability of taking initiative. Next time, he will again take initiative of a bigger project. Fine. And all these stages, they have the reflection upon your next life as well, when you become an adult. So it doesn't become difficult for that person to take initiative when he or she is an adult. Then if the child is not encouraged, if the child is discouraged, then he develops a sense of guilt, a sense of shame that he can't do this thing. For example, upon a very little failure, if the child is rebuked, if the child is scolded and discouraged that you cannot do this thing, you are unable to do this thing, then the child, instead of having that confidence of doing things, he has the sense of guilt. And later on, it becomes very difficult for the individual to take an initiative, and the sense of self also gets weak. The sense of self, your image related to your own self, it also becomes very weak. The fourth stage is industry versus inferiority. Industry is related with hardworking. Fine. Now this stage is between the life years of 6 and 12. Now here, as you can see, the school years, they start, and the child forms social relationships. The child forms the relationships with the school friends, with the peers, from the neighbors and other children who are living around. So they play with each other, they do many activities with each other. Side by side, getting education, they get involved in extracurricular activities as well. All these things, they require a lot of energy consumption. That is why it is industry, because the child has to compete in the school environment and has to compete in the social environment as well. Fine. So a lot of hard work is required. Now here the child needs proper training and encouragement during this period. The child needs the training that who should be the friend of the child, with whom the child should develop friendship, what are the games where the child should take part, and how he can compete in the educational environment. Then if this training is provided to the child, then the child is he or she develops this thing which is known as industry. He likes to work life, and in the later stages he works very hard. Whereas if the child is deprived of proper training, guidance, encouragement, cooperation, then the child develops inferiority complex, which is very important. Like, if inferiority complex is developed in a child, then the child cannot take any single step in the life. Child is all the time in the feelings of doubt that he will not be successful when he will initiate this particular task. The child doubts his abilities. He has very weak sense of self, and in this way the whole life of that particular child gets disturbed. So as you can see that during these stages, encouragement, and even in the later stages, the positive encouragement and guidance, it matters a lot, because that guidance gives the child a way to follow, a path to follow. Fine. And encouragement gives the child the moral support that he can do this thing. Is it clear? So this stage is very important, because here the child is involved in multiple roles and has to compete in various environments. Now the stage 5 is identity and role versus role confusion. This stage is basically the stage of adulthood. Here the child develops relations with the peers. This is the stage where the child experiences physiological changes. As you can see, the early adulthood is the time of adolescence, and which is known as the stage of storm and stress. Adolescence is known as the stage of storm and stress, because the child faces a lot of hormonal physiological changes and has to make balance, psychological, physiological balance during this stage. Now the friends, they become very important during this stage. An individual wants to spend most of his time with the friends, and usually children, they don't listen to their parents, but they will agree to their friends, and they want to have most of their time with their friends. Now the individual wants to have complete independence. You might have seen an adolescent who is all the time arguing with the parents that you people don't know anything, I know this thing, I can do this thing. Fine. So it is their natural requirement that they want to have complete independence, because they want to have their personal identity. Now in order to foster that sense of personal identity, they want to have complete independence. Now if the individual is granted proper guidance and independence, then he develops personal identity. And if he is not given that independence, then he develops role confusion. Role confusion is when there is no sense of self, when there is no direction in life, when there is no awareness of your identity. You become confused who you are, what can you do. Fine. So this is role confusion. So you see, again here, while giving complete independence, proper independence, guidance matters. Otherwise the individual can form friendship with anyone. They can get involved in any activity. So again, proper guidance is very important, and each stage is the effect of the previous stage. If the guidance, proper care was given during the previous stages, here the child has the feeling of trust, and he feels autonomous. He has control over self, which basically enhance personal identity of any individual. Okay, sixth stage is intimacy versus isolation. Now you are familiar with the word intimacy, to have strong attachment, to have strong emotional attachment. Fine. Now again the stage consists of adulthood. Previous stage was basically related with the early adulthood, which were the years of adolescence. Now this stage consists of adulthood. Now here the individual wants to be very successful individual, as well as he makes various plans and wants to accomplish a lot of things. And side by side all these things, the individual has a strong desire for love by having a strong and intimate relationship with friends. Fine. So there are professional pursuits as well, and there is the individual's thinking is family oriented as well. Fine. He wants to start a family as well. And before that he has strong feeling of love, and he wants to excel in his professional life. Now if the individual fails to get emotional attachment, then he becomes, or he has the feelings of worthless. He considers himself that he cannot do anything, and the result of this feelings of worthlessness is that he or she become alone. They become alone, they suffer from loneliness. Whereas the individual who are successful, they have strong relations with their friends, which give them love, affection, care, who are available to them at the time of their need. And poor relationships make the individual isolated. Stage 7, generativity versus stagnation. Now generativity means to accomplish something, to produce something, and stagnation is when there is no movement, when there is no development, when there is no healthy outcome. Now here the individual is at the middle age of adulthood, okay? And the plans that were initially made, they show their effect now in the previous stage, when the individual wants to excel in the professional life, wants to start a profession. Its effect can be seen during this particular stage. And in the previous stage, when the individual wants to start a family life, now they have started a family life and they have become a parent, or they are a professional now, they are in any profession. Now how they adjust in these two environment, it matters a lot. They have the responsibilities related to their family life, they have the responsibilities related to their professional life, and the individual wants the successful completion of these responsibilities. Fine. Now, side by side all these things, the individual is living a fulfilling life. Life is not related to your family life or your professional life only. You also want to do so many things for the community as well, for the welfare of other individuals who are not in the circle of your friends or who do not belong to your family, but you want to do something for their fulfillment, for their help. Fine. So this thing improves generativity. Is it clear? Initially, you want to be a successful parent, you want to be a successful professional, then you want to be a successful member of the whole society or community. How can be you successful? If you show your positive influence upon the community, upon the society. And if the individual does not get this opportunity, or if the individual fails to do this, means that if the individual is unable to meet the responsibilities of family and professional life, and he is showing no role in the society, then this is what we call it as the stagnation. The individual's psychological development becomes stagnant. His talent, social life, it becomes stagnant, means there is no movement. Fine, it remains there. And then the last stage, which is ego, integrity versus despair. Ego, you're very well familiar. What is ego? Fine. Integrity, how ego is balanced, integrated. When ego is integrated, then your whole of life is very healthy and successful. Because if you remember, I told you in first year that ego is basically the decider of all the decisions in your life. So how you make any decision, it affects its outcome, they affect your life. So this is the last stage, and here the individual basically analyzes his past. Fine. It is the period of retirement and old age. An individual remains busy in analyzing his past. If the past was like there was effective planning in past, the family and professional life was very, very effective, there was proper planning for future, there was proper guidance given to the children in their life by the parents, then there is the feeling of pride and satisfaction in old age, which basically shows ego integrity. And if there was no effective planning in the previous years, there was feeling of mistrust, hopelessness, dissatisfaction, discouragement, fine, from the other people, and there was no intimate relationship, there was no quality work done in the professional life, no support or no role played for the community and society in general, then the individual has the feeling of hopelessness. He feels that he is a failure in life, which results in despair. Is it clear? So these were the 8 stages of Erikson. Now this is the flow chart where you can very clearly see the stages, conflict, important event, and the outcome. The very first stage, infancy, and the conflict is between trust and mistrust. An important event related to this stage is feeding, and the virtue they adopt during this stage is will. Fine. So the outcome is that the children develop a sense of trust when the caregivers they provide care, and if they lack this care, it will lead to mistrust. Then the early childhood, where the conflict is autonomy versus shame and doubt. The important event is toilet training. Now the children need to develop a sense of personal control over physical skills and a sense of independence. Success leads to feeling of autonomy. Failure results in feelings of shame and doubt. Initiative versus guilt, which is preschool years. Exploration. Children need to begin asserting control and power over the environment. Success in this stage leads to a sense of purpose. Children who try to exert too much power experience disapproval, resulting in a sense of guilt. Then school age, industry versus inferiority, and the important event is school. Children need to cope with the new school and academic demands. Success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results in feelings of inferiority. Adolescence, 12 to 18 years, identity versus role confusion. Social relationships are important event. Teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. Success leads to an ability to stay true to yourself, while failure leads to role confusion and a weak sense of self. Young adulthood, intimacy versus isolation. Relationships are important. Young adults need to form intimate, loving relationship with other people. Success leads to strong relationships, while failure results in loneliness and isolation. Middle adulthood, generativity versus stagnation. Work and parenthood. Adults need to create or nurture things that will outlast them, often by having children or creating a positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to feeling of usefulness and accomplishment, while failure results in shallow involvement in the world. And then is the ego, integrity and despair, maturity, reflection on life. Older adults need to look back on life and feel a sense of fulfillment. Fine. Success at this stage shows that ego is integrated, and whereas failure, it shows that ego is not integrated. It just results in despair. Now you can see from this flow chart and from my lecture as well that each stage has the effect upon the other stage. So the new stage is basically preceded by the previous stage, and it gets affected by the outcomes of the previous stage. If the feelings of mistrust has emerged, then the child is unable to take any initiative, has difficulty in starting a task, in feeling autonomy, fine, and will have difficulty in forming relationships, fine. And even if the relationships they have formed, there will be feelings of mistrust. So all these stages, they have their impact upon the next stage. But Erikson was of the opinion that individuals, they have the ability to master the outcomes of any stage, even if they are facing those outcomes during the next stage. Means that you can overcome the feelings of mistrust in the next stage as well. If there is will, if you want to do it, then you can do it. Is it clear? So this was all about the Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, psychological development. Fine. Hope so it is clear to you. Inshallah, next will be Kohlberg theory of moral development.